thank you, the organizer, for inviting me and giving the opportunity to address today. I'm very pleased to be in Leiden. It's a fantastic venue and fantastic session. So yes, as I've got this weird situation where I'm still an academic, but I'm working also in pharma now. So I've got what I wanted to tell you about is the experience of what we built in a previous life as academic was a FAIR cookbook as part of the IMI FAIR Plus project. We have a lot of collaborators in the room anyway, so it's very nice to see them. But it was in a way done, it was an IMI project, so public and private partnership. But once I shifted over to the industry, I think it was interesting to reassess what we had developed in the FAIR cookbook and see whether what the kind of content that we had was still fit for purpose, or if we had somehow missed the target. So that's the kind of reflections I would like to share with you today in this short presentation. I will start with acknowledging the people in the team at AstraZeneca who welcome me in the team, and which also have fed the kind of reflection as well. So the FAIR cookbook, for those who don't know, is an Elixir Europe project, supported project. You can find this document at this URL. Technically, it's a Jupyter book, so a set of markdown files and Jupyter notebooks with a thin layer over Sphinx that is rendered and hosted on GitHub. So everything is very, very straightforward somehow, I guess, to deploy. Also, the cost of maintenance is very low since we are hosted by GitHub. So that's something in terms of sustainability that was, I think, a good thing. On the bad thing, I think there is a barrier to entry for non-tech people, which could be a problem. So I think this is also an experience that we had. But overall, I think we also show that the practice of having documented everything in GitHub gives this kind of ability to go back and check and maintain things very effectively. So this is a result that we call the FAIR Cookbook for Doer. And the main driver for that was that at the time when we started with FAIR Plus, I think there was a lack of hands-on training or guidance. A lot of people were talking about FAIR, but were not providing much evidence about how the process of converting that data to possibly a linked data graph was actually done in reality, and what were the challenge, what kind of capabilities you had to have in place to deploy a strategy for your data and providing a pathway towards FAIR. At the moment, we have 84 recipes. I think, as I said, the project is finished, but we are still looking for content. And we have spawned a number of communities depending on your field of interest. Obviously, now that I'm part of AstraZeneca, the aspect of the impact FAIR can have along the pipeline is really of interest. Where we could deliver most value for the business is really an essential criteria for deciding which area we will verify. But in other domains, like plant, for instance, we've got very strong collaboration with plant scientists in Germany and France. And so I think we can also provide this kind of targeted profiles using a set of resources. What I wanted to also highlight is that we have a set of hypotheses and rule of engagement when we deployed the FAIR cookbook. So first of things, we didn't want to rely on any commercial platform. So we wanted to be completely open source, at least, you know, to have no hindrance in a way or commercial ties. Which in a way, in hindsight, could be also an alienating aspect. So this was pros and cons. So, but we also wanted to avoid any catch-up in paywall and things like that. But I will go back to that point. The thing, it was a kind of balancing act between availability and practicality for people to deploy and establish courses, for instance, training material with that. But also when we had a lot of discussions about how do we pitch, who is our audience, how do we identify the kind of target that we have, and we always had the tension between, you know, since we had people from academia and people from industry, and we had people that were technical and people who were absolutely non-technical, so we had to be able to communicate without necessarily alienating our audience. So that's the kind of also a long reflection. And eventually we went on the technical side mostly. We wanted to show pragmatically with open source tools how you could build and maintain knowledge graphs in some situation, in a number of documented situations. Now we talk about R&D pipeline. It's interesting to see the kind of point of action that we need to hit. We can hit the drug discovery pipeline on the fundamental research aspects, early science, but also late science and clinical trial steps. So when we are looking at dealing with the result, the outcome of clinical data, and how do we verify that, but also looking at the pharmacovigilance aspect. There are several posters already at the conference, which are interesting use cases or situations where we can apply different patterns of verification for, or make, inform the kind of things you need to be aware if you want to connect those different worlds, because there are different kind of standards operating into those spaces. What I wanted also to insist on is that the FAIR Cookbook embeds the notion of data maturity. So FAIR is a journey. You don't have to deliver the full gamut in one go. So you can plan for this and choose the level of pain you want to undergo in this journey, depending on also the kind of level of investment your company or your institute is willing to go for along the path. So these are the kind of important features that you need to think about. And then when we look at the kind of issue that we ran at the beginning of the project, we obviously had significant problems in accessing data. So that was a massive roadblock. And I think things like Synthea, having synthetic data set, you are tether-free, you can operate, but you can still train your students or your personnel with this kind of data is a way forward, but also having the ability to engage with people or who are the holder of the data that can release some of this information, at least on the pattern that you can work on from and deliver the transformation pipeline that you need is important. So that's kind of the notion of availability of the information. Then we can reflect on the validity of some of the content in the cookbook. So if we had a long section about search engine optimization, and of course, when we do this on public site, you can use schema.org to tune your traffic. But of course, within a corporate organization, that's definitely out of sight. In most organizations, like pharma, they use commercial solution. A few names in mind. I don't want to mention any candidate here, but you know them anyway. So I think that's the problem of applicability of some of our content, and it would be nice moving forward, say, and revisiting the constraint that we had initially about not or ruling out any commercial platform, to associate a capability with a delivery and see what our people are actually using in the wild and define the kind of tool, write by the success stories for the verification path or verification strategy using those tools, just to give a set of pointers to users. So this is the transition between this kind of small boat to dealing in industry. Now we'll focus on a number of capabilities that we have been, in a way, highlighting or focusing on when building the content of the FAIR Cookbook. So this is not particular order, but these are the core things that you need to have in place if you want to deliver FAIR data in your organization. So you need to have some notion of what is a PID, a persistent identifier, and the resolution services associated to that. You need to have metadata registry of some sort. You need to understand what are control terminologies and vocabularies. Obviously, you need to have a semantic modeling capability in your organization. If you're ignoring all that, if it's not present, then of course verification will be a bit harder, even though claims are made along those things. Well, I will now focus on two aspects. I think the notion of machine actionable metadata profiles, and then the solution of semantic API, because this is something I'm at the moment wanting to explore, and I would like to have feedback from the community as well. So I think in the cookbook, we had, this was actually the output of an Elixir biohackathon meeting, which we embedded. So that was a work with Thomas Lehnert at that time and others. Forget the names, apologize for that. But this was about building, sorry, I go back, building a community profile for this kind of data, COVID sample, associated sample. I want to highlight this card in the book because it indicates also the maturity level. So this one is quite high, which means that we come from an unstructured definition to a fully machine readable action. which can be persisted. And this is indicated just to showcase again that we have that notion of maturity embedded into the recipes. Each recipe is organized usually as a kind of mermaid-based graph to give an overview. This is a very easy way to do the knowledge elicitation when you interact with your experts, just to make sure that you understand each other. Having a convergence and agreement on the task at hand using this was a very effective way to engage. And also, it's very effective way to communicate with our students and this kind of thing. So that also gave an interesting aspect of the development on the cookbook itself. It's time consuming to produce them to some extent, but I think now I was discussing with Andra about options now. So the output was at that time using the salad schema language. It was completely structured. Everything is annotated. All the identification is available. We have the list of vocabularies that are used into these things. So this is defining a kind of profile you would like to have us underline about. And of course, we've got also we were documenting how to validate the input using checks expressions. So that's, again, another way to go the full Monty to define the profile, but also validate the input and showcase what it takes actually to do FAIR at full scale in that sense. It's just also to highlight the kind of skills that you need to be equipped with. This is also documenting a number of tools that help engaging with the community. So I go back here. Yes, so basically, it's all very nice, but the question was to interoperate with what? And I think this is also, when we do integration, that's also an important aspect. If we look at FAIR sharing, the catalog of standards, there are more than 3,000 standards, vocabularies, and things. So you can really face a huge task of struggling with a combinatorial explosion of mixing and matching if you do that randomly with no principle, or if no clear target about how to integrate the data. So, of course, Barents as the Barents, the father of FAIR, was like, we need to let 1,000 flowers bloom, and then there will be the hourglass moment, and it will be a step of convergence. But it would be interesting to see in your hand which are the most popular elements that we should rely on and could converge towards to some extent. Could be naive, but otherwise we will face with just another mapping. Obviously, they have format to do that, but that's expensive and to maintain and to drill. So I think it's important to look at these aspects. And the reason why I mentioned the question of interoperability or choices, I mean, I'm really interested by this the LinkML project, which come out from Chris Mongol group in Berkeley. And many other collaborators. I see you back in the room anyway, so he's been contributing a lot to this. And the reason why I'm mentioning it is again, if there is some choices to be made, as the program is looking at making registries or profiles or metadata profiles, I think it would be interesting to reflect what would be the pros and cons of making these choices and what it carry, how we can collaborate across academia or industry as well to support this kind of efforts, or if there are commercial offering that offer even better options to this. So this is how I just want to highlight a number of tools. Obviously, you can refer to the publications from the group. Yes, there is extremely incredible throughput. This is also a link to a related project, which was BioLink. And so what is interesting is to see the kind of direction of travel as well, to provide a number of hubs or resources that you could tap into possibly and exploit, and possibly that would give you a target for your integration strategy of some sort. So now we'll switch a bit, in a way going back to the notion of a number of models supporting the multimodality experiment. This is and if we were to use this kind of semantic model, shaping profile metadata tools, what we witnessed in FAIR+ was a massive need to integrate multi-omic data sets. So when you are in pharma, you've got the world of clinical data science or clinical trials, where everything is extremely regulated, but omic is not part of that. Well, this is considered as being exploratory data, and therefore not submitted to the regulation or to the deposition to the regulatory agencies necessarily, but there is a huge need to integrate this kind of data because that's the future, obviously. And so we have seen a demand for this kind of elements. We in the FAIR Cookbook, I've looked at using the ISA model for representing a number of multi-omic data sets. There was an expression of interest from Boehringer Ingelheim at the time we were developing FAIR Plus. At the end of FAIR Plus, Janssen was interested as well to look at this. And also Anna Noyes' group as well has published in Giga Science a very interesting paper building a framework for supporting this kind of research as well. And at the moment, I'm working on the multimodal submission brokering system to the DBI. And of course, each pharma is probably developing their own models to do that. We are all doing this. We heard this morning also a nice insight into the development of this kind of notion. So, but how do we somehow converge to this interoperation? Another thing that is interesting to see is the notion of data mesh that is being built, and they are incorporated to produce data product, or you have data service that you need to expose. And so what are the technical choices here? And we looked at programmatic API, and obviously, and how can you bring the notion of FAIR in the services that you have? So in the book as well, there is a recipe dedicated to producing FAIR APIs for the web. You can refer to this recipe number 73, which details how an open API can be expanded to detail a bit more what kind of message you can export. But also, it's interesting to see what are the kind of pattern that you can use to document that you may have several flavors of JSON message that you can serve, even JSON LD, for instance, and what are the patterns that you would highly recommend. So if we look at this from kind of corporate point of view, you have a number of systems that are chosen, and this is from procurement. Different solutions are deployed for a particular need. And if you want to have them talk to each other, you probably need to access a number of vocabulary services or master data services that will have PIDs, and you can rely on that, and you want to embed these calls to the relevant services. Of course, you could have a first message, a first flavor, which is based on your corporate semantic model, but you could also have non-semantic models, just a plain JSON, but you can augment that with your own flavor, with a JSON LD type. But you could also start looking at decorating your JSON with other ontologies or other resources. We can think of HL7 Fire or ADMP, for instance. And depending on the kind of constraint from the regulatory authorities, it might be adequate for a strategic point of view to make those choices. So these are the kind of questions I have, and it would be interesting to see if you are also faced with similar situations and if you have made already choices on this front. So that's the issue of committing to a model. Go all for, and kind of investment that you can make, in addition to patterns, because a number of formats are very polymorphic. There are more than one way to code the same information. So what would be the best ways? And this is probably committee agreement. We need to have this conversation open between the different stakeholders. Another pattern that I see, so that would be, sorry, I go back, this would be kind of FAIR at source, like your systems are natively capable of emitting a message that is compliant to a number of things. If not, then you have to do some kind of transform from the sources into your semantic model. And this is the kind of pattern that I can see happening. A lot of things are put on a kind of cloud warehouse, like Snowflake, for instance, and then Airflow and DBT are connected to do the transformation to the RDF and the link data cloud that you can interrogate. So I think what is interesting is just to document this kind of pattern. This is the experience I could see, and what would be the content that I would like to see augmented in the FAIR Cookbook based on the experience that some of the challenges that industry is facing and some of the solutions that have been developed for generating those graphs, for allowing the navigation into, that's Elisa highlighted very well, in the problem that many companies are facing is finding data. So the first thing is to surface the data, and having that as a knowledge graph would be a first step to do this. So these are the kind of reflections, and the kind of call that we could have is to call for more collaborations and interactions about this kind of what are the technical choice that you make, and if you are a company, if you are using a number of tools, what are your experience, your success, and insight. So I will finish with these two things. We still need to demonstrate the value of FAIR, and in terms of business, it's always the time to insight, time to market, and a reduction of risk. These are the three pillars that you are trying to gauge against, and this is probably also what we need to factor in to be able to demonstrate the value of FAIR within the companies. Of course, the other bit is not having FAIR data, and here we have two risks. So this is a number of engineers using LMM, and they have been stung by the quality of the data, and it's going to be a surprise. And if we don't have that, the problem is that if we don't have FAIR source, we still need to do a lot of cleanup of data before we can hope to build a predictive model that are of good quality. So I'll stop with that. I will take any questions, and thank you very much for your for listening to me.